I'm pleased to introduce Amp Skapii Piikuni elders and traditionalists, Smokey and Darnell rides at the door. Darnell rides, thank you. Darnell rides at the door shares her history of her proud people as an, I'm sorry, I don't, say it one more time. Okan, or Medicine Lodge, Thunder and Beaver medicine woman, painted lodge owner, and member to many Piikuni core groups. She consults on education, culture, traditions, and Piikuni herbology and ethnobotany, and is the matriarch of her huge and ever-growing family. Robert J. Smokey rides at the door as an educator, coach, administrator, business entrepreneur, civic and tribal leader, and traditional caretaker of ancient teachings and bundles. He has served on many boards and councils and developed tribal relationships at the local, county, state, and international levels. Together, Smokey and Darnell operate Rides at the Door Consulting. Please join me in welcoming Smokey and Darnell.
Okay, Tamikis Ganatuni. I think I can take this out. Right, thank you. Nistu anagok nitu kimi, nitu Amp Skapii Piikuni, anasta estaka ninapim, nina asakadamu, na inuchkini. And I'd like to wish her a happy birthday today. It's my mother's birthday in heaven. Also, my granddaughter, my oldest granddaughter's birthday was born 22 years ago, or 27, I guess. But it tells you how old we're getting to be. But I just said, Oki ni stuni tanikunit to kimi, itamik skanatuni, nuksukuax. What that means is hello. Everybody say Oki. Now you know a Blackfeet word means hello. My name is Niit Sii Too Pii, which means lone camper, given to me by my grandfather. Many, many years ago, my great-grandfather beat Donista Eagle Calf John Ground. My grandmother, Mary Ground, Matiyukimyaki, passed away in 1990 at a ripe old age of close to 114. So she was one of my very first teachers in the ethnobotany, the herbology, but she was the last midwife in our area up there at Piikuni, up in the Blackfeet area. We're very happy to be here, and we're not going to take too much time for introductions and everything. But I also said good morning. Itamik skanatui is good morning. Another way to say it's oxikuku at night, but also aksabinaku. So we have a variation in our language. Nuksukuax means all my friends and relatives, and that's what you are to me. Oh, you have one. Yes, he's on.
Good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here, to see so many familiar faces, some new faces. I was telling some of the gentlemen yesterday, if you guys show up in the morning, I'll buy you breakfast. Part of my treaty negotiation. We're going to start out, it's very difficult trying to do a Blackfeet 101 in about 60 minutes. And so we've only highlighted a lot of the areas that we thought would be of interest to all of you. And I know there's a lot of historians. I don't see my anthropologist daughter here yet. The old saying is that an average family, man, wife, son, daughter, and anthropologist. And we have our own anthropologist in our group.
Please observe this an introduction slide very closely, and at the end of this, the presentation, we'll see if you discover something that is really unique in this photo, especially the black and white one.
You know, in the very beginning, our knowledge carriers, keepers, they said when you get up in the morning, always smudge. So in the mornings, our way of life the way that we do things, is we start our day out with smudging. I smudge in the morning, Darnell smudges in the evening. This calls the attention to those above spirits that we call upon on a daily basis to guide us, to help us, to protect us, just like we are today. And we also ask prayers for everybody here this morning so that everybody that are going home today has a nice trip. Those that are staying will have a nice trip tomorrow. So smudging is very much part of that. You know, in the very beginning of our Genesis, our stories go back many, many centuries. And in oral tradition, it's very difficult to read the same story time and time again. A lot of the bands that we have, the other 3 bands in Canada, they have variations of our stories. Here we have the moon, the sun, who was originally man and wife, and then the earth came a little later. And if we had enough time, we could tell you the delicate relation in terms of how that all comes about, in terms of how we believe that we are tied to the cosmos. We're tied to the constellations that are up to the star people. We have stories of where we have relations to the star people in terms of how we attained our music, how we attained our ceremonies, and how we conduct those still today after many, many, many years. The sun and the moon had children.
The sun is not Dosi, the moon is Kokumiki Sum. This is female, she's not made of green cheese. She's not the man in the moon, she's the old lady in the moon. And the earth is Kaskum.
There's a...
Go back.
There's an old lady here in the moon. You see her straight up bonnet here, her head, her shoulders, her body, and her legs are folded underneath, and her arms are folded in her lap. And so you can see how those types of story relate to who we are, how we came about, our origination in terms of how we originated on this earth. Okay. That connection to the stars, very important, because when you look at the Big Dipper, the 7 suns, there's a whole story in terms of how they accumulated that knowledge and ascended into the sky. And you see this on our lodges, this small dedicated lodge that we have here. The Big Dipper is on the man's side of the lodge. The other stars that you see here is the Pleiades constellation, which is the bunch stars. It's 6 boys who made their way into heaven and represented in those 6 stars. They're represented on our lodge on the ladies' side. You can see them there.
Oh, yes. Ikasikamix is the 7 brothers, or the Big Dipper as we know it. Mutbukoiksi is the bunch stars, or the Pleiades. Uyis is the North Star, or what we call the belly button of the universe, or the cosmos. Then we have Ipisuas, which is very important as well. Ipisuas is also represented on our lodge that we have set up in front.
You know, when we talk about Napi's world, Napi was that character that the Creator put in place to teach people the different duties of life, responsibilities. But he was also a trickster. Many other nations have a similar, I guess, would you say individual or person that also taught them different ways of things. And then some of the nations have tricksters like coyote and some of these other objects. But you see here depicted as how Napi took his parflesh and he began to populate the world with the animals, the birds, the different aspects of what we have in terms of our environment. And those things came first before people came, because people came first and they had to be taught a lot of things. And so the Creator told Napi, we got to put these things in place, because if we don't, when we create people first, they're going to screw it all up.
They did.
So he put all of these animals in place. And the picture here also tells us some of our food source. We very seldom ate anything other than the 2-hoofed animals, the elk, the moose, the deer, the antelope, the goat. And some of the other animals with only the two hooves on each leg. The cows and all the other things that you have nowadays came a lot later when the pilgrims came across.
And the buffalo, in the Uwasa. Two-toed animals were all we were given to eat because the old folks would say that if you ate things with paws and claws, that would affect your stomach and your digestive system the same way. So you didn't want anything to paw and claw your tummy. But today, we have taken a different route, and some of us do like Kentucky Fried Chicken and Red Lobster.
Oh, Red Lobster, yikes.
But it was just in the later years that we were able to eat the fish because we consider those a sacred animal. They're called a siyatapi. And it was in a time when we were given permission to eat fish when people were hungry. So that's a long story in itself, too.
You know, when we talk about geography and kinship, we talk about the homeland. Many, many times I have to correct individuals in terms of our homeland that's here. We didn't have a paper that said we owned it because what the Creator gave us was that ability to work the land. That's why our close association with the environment was so very important, because this homeland consumed almost 770 million acres of land from up in Edmonton, Alberta, and it was past the Yellowstone. We called it the Elk River. And in today's world, a lot of people are claiming that same area, which is fine because we allowed a lot of people to come in, hunt buffalo, to enjoy social life. We didn't always fight each other. And when we decided that they had enough or they wasted what they came for, we kicked them out of our territory. One of the things that I always tell our neighboring tribes is, yeah, you guys were allowed to come into our territory and hunt and fish and gather and camp with us and the whole works. I said, but when you have a person that has died, where do you bury him? You take him back to your homeland where you come from and you bury him at your home. There are a lot of stories. My grandfather, he went on 14 successful exploits into the enemy territory, bringing back horses. The good-looking ladies followed him home. No. But he always told and shared those stories with everybody. You can see here that the stewardship that we talk about, the quote there, I'm going to have Darnell tell you about the quote.
People before the park, it's understanding of our history and land stewardship, of course. But you take care of the land and the land will take care of you. That's one of the basic principles that we were given by our old people. We call them Niit Sii Too Pii, the big old wise ones. And when we were told that, that's what we set out to do as a people. And they also told us how well you do this will give you the results, and kind of see the results now.
You know, this particular article came out in National Geographic. And in having my college degrees, I always looked to science before I really got into understanding who I am as a Blackfeet member. My mother and grandmother, they were Sioux from the Port Pequot's, and I'm related to Sitting Bull on my mother's Sioux side. But the Blackfeet side to me was very interesting because I found out that not only were here almost 17 to 20,000 years ago by the Ancestry.com and all of these DNA capabilities that we have now, but we also can apply the scientific part of it because up in Saskatchewan on the Montana border, they discovered a campsite, which is 20-some thousand years old, and the scientists believe that it's Blackfeet, which I always said, of course it's Blackfeet. That's why we were there. We built fires too. And so the story, and of course sometimes science can be a little confusing because in the same article they said that one woman created all the natives in America. And I said, wow, that's one powerful woman. But again, we go back and we compare. For me, I like to compare dates from what happens here to what happens there, how it affected us back that many years ago, how it affects us today, and all of the types of comparisons in terms of how we fit into the whole scheme of things, because we know how we came about. The dog days to horse culture. Those of you that are historians, you know that many, many years ago, the horse was a native of North America. And supposedly during one of the ice ages, they died out. And then some happy Spaniard came along with 10 studs and 2 mares, and we have over 30-some million horses in North America. Again, a science fact that I kind of question in terms of what happened to the horses that were already here. And those numbers don't compare. If you are raised on a farm, 10 studs and 2 mares don't multiply that fast. And so you can see how important it was for us not to gain money. Yes, Blackfeet men were allowed to marry more than one woman. That's a treasure, I guess, in a sense, way back.
You're awfully hard today, though. I have 6 sisters, and I couldn't live with all of them. Wait.
I couldn't either. And so the horse, they say we got the horse, the Blackfeet got the horse around 1700. And I said, by the time that white guy seen us riding those horses, we had already captured and maintained a horsemanship probably 100 years before that. Because we could ride on a full gant and shoot from underneath the neck of the horse and shoot our enemy that is standing there without the horse. And so that horsemanship had to be developed over the time before that person seen us riding those horses. And so that became very important in terms of how we as Plains people not only migrated, but had warfare, but that wealth of the horses is what determined the family. Plus you could have a larger encampment in terms of mobility. You could have bigger lodges. And so the horse become very important to us.
I just want to mention one thing about the dog. You heard us talk about the 7 brothers when they went to the sky to be the bunch stars. They had dogs with them, and those dogs helped save the people when there was a drought, a severe drought, because they could smell the water and they brought the water back. We have a deep respect for this animal in our traditions and our culture. Dogs are very, very important to us, and they're highly respected. That's why you see a lot of res dogs.
Plus we don't eat them.
We don't eat dogs.
The other part of that horse element that made us the fiercest tribe on the plains was the gun. We acquired the gun right after we acquired the horse. And so our mobility on a horse was a heck of a lot more. And with that gun, a lot of the other nations on the plains didn't have guns. And the other factor about that is some of our warriors were 7 feet tall. We have war shirts that were given to the Fort Edmonton commander back in 1840, and we had a 6'7" guy. They traveled with Darnell and a group up there to look at those shirts. They wouldn't let them come into America because we could then repatriate them back to our own use, so they kept them in Canada. And the individual put on a mock shirt that they had made up, and the sleeves were much longer, the leggings were much longer than a 6'7" guy. So we know that the individuals that wore those was of some height. But can you imagine, you have a bow and arrow, you're standing there and you're saying, where's that Blackfeet guy? I'm going to get him. And he comes riding up on a horse, and he's 7 feet tall, and he's got a gun. We know the consequence of what that's going to turn out to be. And that's what happened. And that's why Thomas E. Males in his book in 1970, when he wrote it, he said the Blackfeet were the fiercest tribe on the plains because of that capability that we had.
And I believe it's appropriate here to mention that in our traditions also we had what you would call giants, and we're descendants of those. But we also had little people, like the Irish have the leprechauns. We have little people, they're still with us today, and they're our tobacco planters. The following slides will be the unique attributes to our people, our history, and the reason and the how and why of us.
We talked about the territory a little bit earlier. The other part of that is the straight up bonnet. The bonnet that I have here is a laid back. It's a Sioux style. John Wayne made that bonnet famous because every Indian in his movies wore that bonnet, whether that was in their nation or not. And but it's also a bonnet that isn't really tied to ceremonies. Like the straight up one came from the Bull Society, which was the eldest gentleman of our nation that had the knowledge, that had the responsibility, that had the respect of those members of our nation. And they wore that. And the only time that a woman was able to wear a bonnet was during the return of their warriors that celebrated that they came home safely. And in today's, we have changed that a little bit to where we now celebrate the accomplishments of individuals, and they awarded either a straight back or a straight up bonnet, which is also part of the culture that we have. The Blackstone pipe is very important because one of the only areas that we have to get Blackstone pipe is in Glacier Park and in some of the areas around our countries. Because of the medicine line we call the Canadian border was established, it prohibited us from going into some of our traditional areas as South Pagan, as Amp Skapii Piikuni. That line now determined whether we were south or north. And that's why we still use the word Piikuni, because that's who we were. And
That's who we are.
The lodges. You see the lodge, the little lodge here. We use that as demonstration. We have full-size lodges. We have 18-footers, which is a little taller than the ceiling here. We have 26-footers. We made a 36-footer one time for our ceremonies. And we put almost 200 people in there sitting on the ground with our ceremonies. And so in modern techniques, we have a lot of those abilities.
With the painting of the lodge indicates many, many different things in there. There's subject matter in there, including math, science, geography, geometry, the astrology, the contributions of the moon, the sun, and the stars. But also it lets you know who you are and where you live. Anything at the top is the sky, and then below that is the center part, the spiritual part, the dream part, or the transferred part, very important there. And then on the bottom is where you live. You see this one has a straight line. The one at the demonstration in the front of us has two little diamonds pointing up all the way around. That means you live in the mountains. If it was two straight lines and a curve on top of it, that would indicate that those people live in the hills. Then there are circles on the bottom. That is kakatus, or the puffballs. You know it as a mushroom, but it's also a plant. So all this indication here will give you stories, it'll give you history, it gives you the traditions and culture, the protocol. Once you have a painted lodge, there's certain rules and regulations you must follow before you can have it. You have to have 4 Inniskims, for instance. The female side is important, the male side's important, and all these things tell a story, but they're also teachings. And the woman owned the home. So if there was a divorce, guess what, ladies? Traditional law says you get the house. Lock, stock, and barrel.
One of the very important ceremonies that we have is we call the Okon, or the Medicine Lodge. A lot of writers, when they came and they visited us, because they came through North and South Dakota and they heard the word Sundance, they referred to our ceremony as a Sundance. We have a Sundance, but it's the 5th day. You see here the ceremony that was done prior to about 1889 on the left, and then Darnell and I, our ceremony that we completed around 2004. We have sat holy for 4 days without food and water numerous times, which makes us the Okon leaders and people of our band. And so you can see the similarities between what was passed down during those late 1800s, 1890s, to this 2004 ceremony that we had. And we try to have these every year now. It started back in about 78, 79, when we began to look at it. And prior to that, there was probably one done in the 1960s at Hart Butte, and then there was one done in Browning, I think in about 64, 65, and then it went away. And a lot of it had to do with national acts that kept our items that were taken from us by the anthropologists, the archaeologists, and the historians that were coming in and raiding our graveyards and taking those possessions. But we also were compiled with the Christianity that came in. We talked about D. Smith here a day or so ago, We talked about different historical things in the last couple presentations yesterday. But Christianity told our people that these things are bad. And when we get to that point, I'll tell you about how that educational component was supposed to take us from nomadic people to farmers, which never, ever happened.
The Ukan is the central annual event of our nation's cycle, but it's also for creating balance, making sure that we have plenty of food, including the ini or the buffalo that's coming back in greater numbers. But it's also there to resolve conflict and make sure that our people are happy, healthy, and continue to live a good life. It's done every year when the berries are ripe in the spring, and we're told to build that lodge.
We talk about ceremonies and traditions because these were the things, the items and the ceremonies that Creator gave us. And these were passed down. One ceremony, we have 108 songs. And we were very fortunate because we were somewhat in our younger age when these old people start telling us about nobody there to take up the rope and take up the slack in terms of what our ceremonies was. And we became very in tune in terms of what they had to offer. And we were lucky because we had recording systems, we had recording components that we began to record their songs. And those were very particular because you sing those songs in a very particular order from song 1 to song 108. And those ceremonies and actions that go along with it are very important because they honor that environment and those above spirits, the around us spirits and the below spirits, because you honor those in those ceremonies.
The Piikuni concepts of sacred bundles is shown here. You can find this in Akakstamon in Reg Crowshoe's book, but this gives you an idea of the things that you are that you can acquire in historical value, but also in the personal and sacred ceremonial portions of that of your daily life. And you'll see on the outside is the everyday things like the lodge, the shield, the shirts, the lances, the bonnets, and parfleshes and rattles. And in the middle you get into some other transferred items, which would include the bows and arrows, lances, and songs, of course, go with every one of these. But when you get into the circle 3, that's when you become up on that higher echelon of bundle keepers, bundle holders of the traditions in our bands. And then in the middle is Okan, which is the highest of all these sacred bundles and sacred ceremonies. This depicts an Okan back in the early 1900s in Browning, Montana. But we also have a picture of the bundles. People ask us, what is a bundle? This is a picture of them that was put out several years ago. The one on the tripod is the thunder, which is an Amp Skapii Piikuni. The one on the bottom is the Kistaki Piikuni, which is the beaver. And they all contain things that we pray with. We become transitioning with them in ceremony, but we also have to honor them because when we hear the first thunder, that's our spring. It's not January. That's our spring. It's our new year. It's not January 1. The bundle keepers of the beaver are our storytellers, the lodge, the winter count holders, and they're also the calendar keepers. So there's many things that go with just looking at these objects and seeing them. There's big responsibility, huge responsibility. Language and philosophy is really important because these are our teachers. We call upon them in spirit as well today. Agakada, as Mike swims under, we called him tenderly MSU. Molly and George were the last of the original thunder keepers of the Misamahkwiniman, which is a long time pipe, and that is probably close to 300 years old. So these people we're recognizing them now today as our giving them tribute and honor. Spirituality in dreams is really important, and I'll let Smokey take over there.
You know, we talked earlier about our association with the environment. Everything that was given to us by the Creator through Napi had a spirit. And with that spirit came a song. One day I had an individual come through the mountains, and he was very scared because he was walking. And he said, I wasn't sure if an animal would come out and eat me or attack me or whatever. And I says, for me, I don't have any trouble because those animals have spirits. Those rocks have spirits. And when you know the song in a ceremony and you're in doubt, sing them or pray to them. Give them some tobacco, and they're not going to bother you because they have that place in life just like you have. The dreams are very important because that's our association with the other world. A lot of times, and especially our young people today, they're getting dreams that are coming to them with messages. How to do this, how to do that, respect this, respect that, do it in this way. And that's very important to us because when I was growing up, if I told one of my teachers I had a dream about my grandfather coming to me, I'd be in Warm Springs. They'd think I was crazy. But today we promote that so that we have that connection to the other side. And it's very, very important to us. You know, this area here, we were kind of hesitating putting it in there because prejudice, we thought that Darnell and I, we went to school in California, and only once in the 2 years that I was there did I ever experience being refused in a restaurant of being served because I was an Indian, because they thought I was Mexican because I was dark. And I told the lady, I said, you know, it really puzzles me because you gave me a menu, but I don't see Indian on the menu. But you're refusing me service. But the manager wouldn't come out for me to talk to him in a politely way. But prejudice is very much alive. You go to various organizations, and you see it on TV all the time, where somebody's thing or somebody's house of worship is burnt down or whatever. But you can see how we talk about the kill the Indian, save the man. That was come out of the Civil War, where General Pratt said, well, let's establish a school so we can educate these heathens to where they can become civilized and they become farmers. And you can see the balance.
The balance here is my grandfather, the one that I told you gave me my Indian name, Beat Donestad. This is him in his military from Carlisle, the one in the middle. And this is him in later years, painted by Langdon Keene, another artist that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, especially Sally. Is she here? And, oh, there she is. Good morning, my girl, my daughter, my anthropologist daughter. So all these things build into our history, of course, and we always do our best to be able to overcome these things with our sense of humor and the things that we have endured. Slaughtering of the buffalo became one of the things that happened in our history, and that is take away the food and you take away that person. But you can read this on your own, you can take a photo of it, but the native people were put into a starvation mode. But we also had things that helped us spiritually.
I mentioned the fact that Civil War really set a mentality in terms of how the government treated Indians, because a lot of the people that were enlisted in that Civil War were moving west under the conditions of the United States government. One of the other generals, General Sherman, told Congress, he said, why are we fooling with those Indians? We just moved 36 of them to Oklahoma, and Oklahoma originally had four nations. They've got 39 there now. He says the best way to deal with those Indians is kill off their food source. And so the government sponsored a program to where those soldiers and those hunters could come west now that the train tracks were completed. And in Montana, 1883, in that era when the train was completed, there was gorges and gorges of people coming across killing buffalo for the heads and the hides. And the Indians couldn't realize why there's 300 buffalo dead and nobody's eating the meat. And so from 60,000 head of buffalo, the one figure I had is 2,000 were left in Yellowstone. And from that herd, there's probably about 500,000 what I call buffalo in America now, mostly on private. And our tribe has about 400 head of buffalo that we're raising now, which came to the tribe back in the 80s when I was on the council. And so we have a lot of connection to that animal itself. Yesterday we talked about one of the presentations was the Vietnam vets, and I really appreciate those guys because their stories are so close because I was almost drafted into that Vietnam area. Only thing, I was producing oil in Wyoming, so they exempted me and I went back home. But that warrior mentality that we have represented not only in World War I, World War II, Korean, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, all of these wars, the people were, the Indian people were well represented in those areas as enlisted people. And we always honored that, you know, and we look at those veterans in terms of that warrior mentality that's in their DNA. These individuals that we have here, if you look on the lower left picture, this poor guy is on his horse and he's got a whole bunch of skins on his other horse and he's surrounded. They say these are Crow warriors, but to me they're Blackfeet because they're up there in our mountainous areas. He's not going to get away. There's no way he's going to get away with that many hides. And so that warrior mentality continues to be very much there.
And speaking of warrior mentality, we have what we call Pita Mahkan. She's a woman warrior. She was given the right to be that. She had to raise her family after her parents perished. She is depicted here as what we call a manly-hearted woman. We didn't have such things as the gay, HGTBQ and all those at that time, but we allowed her, our people allowed her to be a woman warrior. And she's honored by our people on a daily basis, but she's also remembered by everybody in history as Pita Mahkan, Running Eagle, and you'll see that in the Glacier Park, Running Eagle Falls.
These next couple pictures that we have, this is my great-grandfather rides at the door. My dad on the left there and Darnell's dad on the right. They served in the service. When my dad talked about that, it was very seldom that he talked about the battles because of all of the people that he knew and had lost on some of those exploits into the South Pacific. These are members of our family, the boys on the left and our nieces on the right there.
Our niece is Kaylin Olivia Rutherford. She was the first Blackfeet to be recruited as a Marine out of Skyview High School, Billings, Montana. So she's stationed in Hawaii. Herbology and ethnobotany is really important to us. SOM is what we say for medicines and powers of healing. These are just a small sample of what we have in our medicine pharmacy today. A lot of people know them as just wildflowers or picking berries, but those very poles on our lodges are plants. Those are lodgepole pine. Those little buttons that hold them together, that's probably savasberry. The pegs on the bottom are either strong birch, chokecherry, or savasberry. So these are all really important to us. We have preventative medicines. We have medicines that help people with common colds, but we also had the skunk that helped us with COVID. A lot of people that knew of the skunk medicine didn't get COVID.
We talk about historical impacts, these events that I got just a few listed. And I'm sure those of you that are historians would be able to add probably 2 or 3 more pages to that. And so when we look at this, we look at the treaties. Lewis and Clark actually had a map that was developed by a Blackfeet guy that had passed on to a gentleman called Fiddler. Fiddler in turn gave it to England. The president then got the map from England, but it didn't have the names. It had just the descriptions of the rivers, the mountains, the valleys. And that's what Lewis and Clark came across America with, was that map that the Blackfeet guy had. The treaties that we talked about that yesterday, because 51, we weren't even at the treaty, but yet they were determining land, because again, we didn't have a piece of paper that's saying that we had that land between the Mussel Shell and the Elk River, and so that 51 treaty gave that land to common hunting ground. The other treaties are there. The executive orders, I think we all know what damage an executive order can do, but executive orders took almost about 20 million acres of our land and gave it to the railroad. We have that railroad that comes from North Dakota on into West Glacier and on into Spokane. All that land was given by executive order. The railroad was the largest landowner in Montana at that time during the 1880s, and it was very difficult because we had possession of those. The missionaries that we talked about, when De Smet come by, we did not allow him to stay in our country because we didn't trust a man that had a skirt. And so he had to go around, and you look at the historic value of De Smet. He went around and he began to Christianize the Flathead Valley, and then he finally came into Blackfeet country through Canada, through Crow's Nest Pass. The
Historical events, do you want me to do this? Historical events, you can see them. We just named a few. The massacre in the Marias, Starvation Winter, Glacier National Park, Dawes Act, the flood of '64. There's still, I believe, 7 people that have bodies have never been recovered. Smallpox epidemics, we've gone through 4 and lived through them. COVID and intergenerational trauma and alcohol are some of the historical events. We never had alcohol. Our bodies cannot tolerate it like we cannot tolerate some of the foods of today. So in our history, 12 minutes.
12 minutes. You don't mind if I don't put any commas or clauses in there? You know, we'll go through this section real fast because the animal and bird values are very important. Because even when the eagle selects a mate for life, she usually will select the male that is the most victorious because the males will battle over her. So she gets the victor. But when they raise their family, that's the important values of that, is because that group, that male and female bird, takes care of that single chicklet, usually, so that it grows up to have that same leadership qualities that the parents have. The same that we as humans, when we take and raise our kids, we should also have that same value. We look at all of these animals that we have here.
We've already gone through them.
Did we skip through?
Mm-hmm.
If we as traditional people, we can't say the word there, so we got to spell it out, B-E-A-R. And part of that is that strength and capabilities. But if you watch the last, one of the last slides, there was a buffalo on that lodge. That individual had the dream of a buffalo, and all the qualities of that animal was attributed to him through that dream, and he was directed to put that animal on his lodge. And all of the other details that Darnell had talked about in terms of what's on that lodge also complemented him and her as that family.
Boarding schools is another part of our history that we were really happy to see some of the things that were done by the history department here, the teachers that had the students do the boards. It's really important to know these things because a lot of our people now, even our own people at home, have to know these things that happened in our history and the true stories behind them, coming from us, from within, looking out. So Kill the Indian, Save the Man was certainly part of that, and our students are starting to study this. We have such teachers at home now that have gone back and got their degree and come home to teach. We were told at relocation time in the 70s, you leave here, don't come home, there's nothing for you here. We didn't listen, apparently. Boarding school has been part of our lives. My sister was a boarding school dorm matron for 30 years, but it was a different era, much different than than it was back in those days. And the trauma still lingers, but there's a lot of things that we're doing in the whole Confederacy to address those, as well as internationally and in the U.S.
You know, we talked about the boarding school and that education system. That was a deliberate plan to separate the young people from the old people, because when they took your children and they located them in Pennsylvania or any of the other federally funded schools, which had tied to the church, they says, we're going to keep your children for at least 10 months. And you are not to speak your language, you're not to practice cutting your hair, we're getting rid of your buckskins, and we're going to put you in cloth. But when they got home for those 2 months, that direct conflict that all of a sudden was there, because now, Mom, you're talking to me in Blackfeet, and I'm not supposed to be talking in Blackfeet. Grandpa, you're telling me about stories in Blackfeet that I'm not supposed to be talking about. and then 2 months later they're gone. And so that cycle began to go. And for me, my dad could speak Indian, he could understand it, he knew the culture, but he said, Smokey, I'm not going to teach you Blackfeet because you might get punished. And I'm sorry that he had that attitude, because that right now, for Darnell teaching me the languages in terms of how I respond is very difficult, because you still have that mindset as to why they didn't teach that.
Preserving and passing on knowledge. You saw the slide before this with the mentorship. Life never stops teaching, so we never stop learning, and that's one of the deepest philosophies, the deepest commandment, and one of the main things that we go by. It's for all of us. All of you could teach me something. My grandchildren can teach me something. So life never stops teaching, so we never stop learning. Preserving and passing on this knowledge is very important, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're living by, and that's what we're pushing forward. But those things were done in a traditional manner, so we make a balance of both worlds. Coming from the beaver people, we make that balance because we know we were taught by the animals who in spirit come to us, and we go to them. And those are the philosophies that we are taught by, and that's how our knowledge is passed on, is through these different things. We also have a kind of a term that we picked up when I was teaching the history and the native studies at Smoke and De La Salle Blackfeet School. Smoke signals to satellites. Smoke signals are really kind of a misnomer. It's like teepee is a Sioux word, Nitoyas is our word. Smoke signals is something that everybody kind of thought Native people do. Well, we didn't do that. We didn't make smoke signals. We had reflective iniskims that would reflect like a mirror, and that's how we communicated. But the main way we communicated was through dreams and also the knowledge of knowing what we knew in our life cycle. Remember when I said the annual central event of our nation's cycle? That annual central event knew the people, and the people knew it, so they centered around that. So every time the third week in July came, it was coming home days. We would all meet for the Okan. So smoke signals to satellites is really important, because we're so appreciative to the AI department here and to our good friend over here that helped us set this up. Family is really important, and our family dynamics is getting to the point where our people are growing. This is just we use our family because we have the permission. We don't have to go out and get them to sign video sheets. But our daughter, the oldest one in the middle, had passed away a couple years ago. We have 4 children left. Our son is the highest ranking Native American in the NFL since Jim Thorpe 125 years ago. Thank you. The other daughter she's an interior decorator, but she's a stay-at-home mom. She has raised 3 children. Her oldest is a lawyer, and he's a graduate at ASU, Arizona State University. The next one is an RN, BSN. She's a travel nurse, raising 3 children, 2 are in college, and her young one is headed to the junior WNBA soon. Our last daughter was sworn in. That's why we were late coming here the other day. She was sworn in as the chief judge of the Blackfeet Nation. The one on the bottom holding the little girl, it's her birthday today. She was born on my mother's birthday. Happy birthday in heaven, like I said, Mom. But she gave us our first great-granddaughter. And the last one, named Smokey over here on this side, is our first great-grandson. So family dynamics is really important. It's important to do the teachings, to be able to make that balance, to make the best of both worlds and continue this life in a good way. One of the other things that we haven't mentioned, and we're going to mention real quickly, is music. Music is really important. It's integral to all of us. You heard Smokey talk about songs. Those teachers taught us these songs for just a ceremony alone. There's over 100 in some of them. One night of singing for us as Okan people, there's 100 songs that have to be sung. We did this with music, as well as coming from the heart, the drum, the whistle, and the rattle. Science and geometry is really important as well. And you heard the descriptions of the morning star and the evening star coming with the cosmos, but this is a depiction of how we do make the best of both worlds, balancing. Here we are gathering berries. We got to have berries for our ceremony. We cannot have a ceremony without the berry soup. So we understand that. But it also teaches patience, diligence, and unique attributes to our food. This berry is the resveratrols. It's better than a glass of red wine a day. It's what we take for things that ail us, but it's also our main fruit, and it is very sweet. We don't need sugar. We're gluten-free. The next generation of knowledge keepers and healers is coming up real fast. This is our granddaughter at 5. She became the leader of the Nibomakiks. At 13, she transfers out. So AARP, 55 and over, doesn't mean anything when you're in Piikuni world. You can be an elder at 13 because you transition. Then you become a parent to that society, and then you become a grandparent, a great-grandparent, and so on down the line. So it's very important. The other photo depicts her transferring it on.
You know, the next generation that we talk about is very important, because if we don't continue to pass the knowledge down, at some point, like the government, it'll go away. The reason I changed my vest to a suit coat is I always told my son, when you go out in public, dress appropriately, because the first thing that anybody's going to tell you, oh, that poor Indians, you see, he dresses bad. And I also put the bonnet on to show that not only can we have the old part of it, but we can present ourselves in a professional manner in a contemporary world of having those degrees, having that knowledge, but also reaching back in terms of our generation of knowledge that we have passed, not only to our children, but all of those people that we're associated with.
These are the health issues in Indian country today. I will let you go through those yourself. The next is the demographics. Currently, the population is over 17,000 on the reservation. I don't like calling it a reservation. We made reservations with Christine here. So there's a balance that you have to depict. But over 500 members disenrolled and re-enrolled in Little Shell Cree Nation. And then you can read the other demographics. There's just about not quite 10,000 that live on the Blackfeet reservation. We are ruled by a tribal government, which is through an election process. And the reservation size now is 1.5 million acres. You heard Smokey say earlier, our original territory was over 740 million acres. And of course, we have the Burlington Northern Railway, the Glacier Electric, and Sai Communications that are working hard still in our area. This depicts the current reservations or nations in our state of Montana. And if you go to the Heritage Center, you will see this in more depth and more detail.
The reason that I put this in here was because when we described our territory, if you look at all of the reservation land that's above the Crow and the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, that was all Blackfeet country. By executive order and by establishments, those tribes then were giving land within our lands so that they would have their reservations. Rocky Boy was established in 1916, and of course Little Shell just got recognized here a few years ago. And so that, to me, was very important, that we gave our land to other Indians. Where did we come from? As Darnell had mentioned earlier, very important to the female side of our both matriarchal and patriarchal societies that we have, because of that balance that she talked about earlier.
And these are my mothers and grandmothers. I'm proud to say Cecile Ground was the first Miss Blackfeet. Prior to that, they called it Dawn Mist. But at 5 years old, she went out to New York and sat on the highest building in New York City. And Molly's going to come up here and knock us off of the stage here in a moment.
She said 5 more minutes. And
Where am I going? This is really a good depiction of our younger people, how we teach them. We're talking about the next generation of healers. These two are probably about 2, close to 3 years old, holding hands, walking away from a ukan. And then you see them watching the ukan being put up. So these are good eye-openers. They're the teaching tools that we say, life never stops teaching, so we never stop learning. But we didn't realize what these little ones were doing at the time. They teach themselves as well by examples of the adults. You can see a lot of action going on in both of these. It's the beginning of a ukan on the left, and then the ending on the right, and on my right,
That's
here.
right.
But you can see the plants, you can see the help of the people, because it does take a village to be able to put up a medicine lodge. You can't do it by yourself. There's that male-female balance. There's the people that are working on the inside, the people that are working on the outside. There's weather, there's everything that goes into this, and we can attest to some of the things that have happened even today in 2024. Amazing, totally amazing.
You know, we put this in here. On the left, I'm trying to teach my grandson how to start a fire with a flint. And we were unsuccessful, so I jerked out the lighter that we have in our picnic basket and showed him both the old and the new so we could have our red wieners. The middle picture is we did a ceremony at Trident down by Three Forks because that was a part of our traditional area. This part of the area where they say John Coulter escaped from the Blackfeet. And I was telling a couple of the people earlier, that's a misnomer. We let him escape because we had cut up his partner, John Potts, to show that what would happen to you if you entered into Piikuni country. And to escape 6 warriors that have been on the plains for the last 2 centuries, and this one guy gets away? No, we let him escape. Send the message.
The other part of this, saying we're still here, this is what we're teaching, the herbology. This is one of our younger granddaughters helping us gather herbs out in the prairie. And on the bottom is the return of those buffalo from the Elk Island herd. This is when we sat and waited for them to come home. And it was a long, hard wait, but it happened. And you will hear that in the stories of the buffalo returning, as the 4 buffalo that were taken from the Piikuni and over to Moise. There were 2 brother-in-laws that were responsible for practically saving the buffalo in that era. It was a good day. It was a sacred day. We talked about the astronomy, astrology, the connection that we have with the cosmos and the universe. We say we came from the stars, and to the stars we shall return. When we do return to the afterlife, we go east to what we call the sandhill, Sapatsiko. And this is a good slide to be able to show you kind of that example. It also can be very touching. This is my grandmother and grandfather going off to their lodge back in that day.
And we're going to end our presentation here today. And these are some of the responsibilities and goals that we have outlined, not only to our families, but I'm sure a lot of you that have grandchildren, you're passing some of these qualities on to them already. And the respect and the goodness that are there are what we push out and profess to our people at home. Capitalism was really an issue many, many years ago because we didn't understand why you would want to do things and get these little funny looking things, these coins and this money, because we were associated with nature. And so this whole element that we have is kind of taking people away from that mentality of being one person, of going back to the reality of being people again, being a community, being a family together to where we share. And like today, all of you people that have been here for the last couple of days, you're all our families. You all know each other because when you see yourself on the street along with the people that you met today, you tell each other hello. That's family. That's what we need more of in today's world is family and that togetherness, and these values are part of it. Thank you.
Nitako sisanan, nitsiko sinidaki means we appreciate all of you. Kitaki damatsin. We never say goodbye. We just say I'll see you later.
And last word, I'm buying lunch today, so don't worry about it.